There is a very quiet way to lose your life. It does not look like failure. It does not look like a collapse. It does not look like a dramatic mistake. It looks like comfort. It looks like a break. It looks like checking your phone for a second. It looks like opening one more tab. It looks like watching something just to relax. It looks like saying, "I will start in a minute." And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. Because the things that steal your life rarely arrive looking like enemies. They arrive looking harmless. They arrive looking useful. They arrive looking deserved. They arrive at the exact moment when something important starts asking something from you. You are about to work. You are about to study. You are about to write. You are about to start the project. You are about to make the decision. You are about to face the thing you have been avoiding. And then a small discomfort appears. Not panic, not a crisis, not a huge emotional breakdown, just a little resistance, a little boredom, a little tension, a little voice that says, "Maybe check something first." And you obey. It does not feel serious. It feels like nothing. It feels like 5 minutes. But 5 minutes rarely stay 5 minutes. And even when they do, the real problem is not only the time. The real problem is what you are teaching yourself every time you escape. You are teaching your mind that discomfort means exit. You are teaching your brain that difficulty means distraction. You are teaching your future that it can wait. And after you repeat that enough times, it no longer feels like a choice. It starts to feel like who you are. You stop saying, "I got distracted." You start saying, "This is just how I am." That is the dangerous moment. The moment a repeated escape becomes an identity. Because now you are not just fighting a phone. You are not just fighting an app. You are not just fighting notifications. You are defending a version of yourself that has become comfortable abandoning what matters. And that version of you does not always feel miserable. Sometimes it feels safe. Sometimes it feels entertained. Sometimes it feels normal. That is the real danger. Obvious failure hurts, but comfortable decline puts you to sleep. It takes 1 hour here, 1 night there, 1 weekend in pieces, 1 year in small leaks, and one day you look back and you cannot point to the exact moment where everything went wrong. There was no disaster. There was no dramatic scene. There was no single decision that destroyed everything. There were just too many moments where you chose the easier thing because the important thing felt uncomfortable. And this is the first uncomfortable truth. You may not be distracted only because you lack discipline. You may be distracted because distraction has become your favorite hiding place. A socially acceptable hiding place. A hiding place that does not embarrass you. A hiding place you can explain. Because nobody sees you scrolling and says, "You are running away from your own life." Nobody sees you opening another video and says, "You are avoiding your own potential." Nobody sees you switching tabs and says, "You are postponing the version of yourself that would demand more from you." From the outside, it looks normal. Everybody does it. Everybody checks something. Everybody needs entertainment. Everybody says they are tired. Everybody says they need a break. And yes, breaks matter. Rest matters. A mind without rest breaks. A body without rest collects the dead. The problem is not rest. The problem is lying to yourself. Because some breaks restore you, and some breaks erase you. Real rest gives you clarity. Escapism gives you fog. Real rest has an ending. Escapism always asks for a little more. Real rest feels chosen. Escapism feels automatic. And that difference matters. There is a huge difference between saying, "I am going to rest for 30 minutes and then come back," and disappearing for 3 hours into things you barely remember. There is a huge difference between choosing entertainment and using entertainment because you could not stand being with yourself. There is a huge difference between pausing and escaping. And many people have spent years calling escape a break. That is why "I need more willpower" is not enough. Willpower helps. Of course it does. But willpower is weak when your entire day is designed to reward escape. You can be motivated for a night. You can feel strong for a morning. You can promise that this time will be different. But if your environment, your routines, and your habits still give your worst impulses easy access, you will eventually return to the same place. Not because you are useless, not because you are weak, not because you do not have talent, but because your system gives the easy thing an unfair advantage. Think about this. A lot of people try to build their dreams with the leftovers of their mind. First, they check messages. First, they answer what feels urgent. First, they consume content. First, they get emotionally tired. First, they fragment their attention. First, they let the world enter. And then, when their mind is already used, they try to do the most important thing. And of course, it feels hard. Of course, they cannot focus, not because they are incapable, because they arrived late to their own life. They arrived with a tired mind. They arrived with broken attention. They arrived after training the impulse to escape. And then they blame themselves. I have no discipline. Maybe you do have some discipline. Maybe you are just using it at the worst possible moment, after your best attention has already been spent on everything else. And some things cannot be built from leftovers. A serious skill cannot be built from leftovers. A meaningful project cannot be built from leftovers. A strong body cannot be built from leftovers. A stable financial life cannot be built from leftovers. A deeper identity cannot be built from leftovers. You do not need to be perfect, but you do need to stop giving your future whatever is left after the day has already drained you. Because what you put last receives the weakest version of you. And if your future always receives the weakest version of you, do not be shocked when it grows slowly. Here is another hard truth. Sometimes you do not need more motivation. You need less access to your weakest self. Your weakest self does not appear out of nowhere. It appears when you make the path easy. The phone beside the difficult task. The addictive apps one tap away. The notifications turned on. The bed too close to the working hour. The important task with no clear time. The day with no priority. The work session with 10 open tabs. The break with no ending. The entertainment with no boundary. And then you ask your mind to be strong. But you prepared the ground for losing. That is not a character flaw. That is bad architecture. Your life has architecture, whether you designed it consciously or not. There are hours when you fall more easily. There are emotions that send you toward escape. There are spaces that help you focus. There are spaces that destroy your focus. There are people who organize your mind. There are people who fragment it. There are routines that prepare you. There are routines that sabotage you. You are not living in empty space. You are living inside a system. And if that system rewards distraction, insulting yourself will not fix it. You have to redesign it, not perfectly, intelligently. If your phone absorbs you, do not place it next to the work that requires courage. If your mornings disappear into noise, stop giving the world your first attention. If your nights always become endless consumption, stop letting the last hour of the day become a carnival of stimulation. If every work session begins with 10 open doors, do not say you cannot concentrate. Close doors, because a mind without doors becomes a hallway. Everything passes through, nothing stays, and a hallway life can be full of movement, but empty of direction. Some people live like that, always connected, always updated, always responding, always available, always consuming, always busy. But when you ask what they are actually building, there is silence. Not because they do not have dreams, but because their dreams never received enough continuity. Continuity is a serious form of love toward your future. Not pretty love, not romantic love. Practical love. Returning, continuing, correcting. Not abandoning something just because it became uncomfortable. Not changing direction every time the excitement disappears. Not confusing boredom with proof that something no longer matters. That confusion destroys a lot of lives. People start something. At first it feels exciting, a routine, a project, a course, a business idea, a creative plan, a new version of themselves. But then the slow part arrives, the repetitive part, the part where there is no novelty, the part where nobody applauds, the part where results are not visible yet. And then they say, I lost interest. Sometimes you did not lose interest. You lost novelty. And because your mind is trained to chase stimulation, it confused maturity with boredom. But everything worthwhile passes through a boring zone. Learning a skill, building a business, saving money, investing, studying, creating content, training your body, fixing your life, healing a pattern. None of that is constant stimulation. All of it has stretches where nothing spectacular happens. Stretches where you repeat. Stretches where nobody validates you. Stretches where you could quit and nobody would blame you. And that is exactly where fantasy separates from commitment. Because when novelty dies, truth begins. Most people do not quit because the path is impossible. They quit because the path stopped entertaining them. That sentence can hurt, but if it reaches you, it can change you. Because maybe your problem is not lack of ability. Maybe it is intolerance to repetition. Maybe you do not need another beginning. Maybe you need to finish something. Beginning feels clean. Finishing is messy. Beginning allows you to imagine. Finishing forces you to face limits. Beginning feels like a new identity. Finishing requires character. That is why many people have more beginnings than results. Not because they lack dreams, but because they lack staying power. And distraction appears right there like the perfect lover. Always new, always easy, always available. Always promising something more interesting than the boring middle of your own construction. If you are not careful, you choose it. Not because you love it, but because it saves you from the weight of staying. But staying is a skill. Staying with a task. Staying with a decision. Staying with useful discomfort. Staying with a goal after the initial excitement is gone. Staying with yourself without needing immediate noise. That is a form of freedom almost nobody talks about. Freedom is not doing whatever you feel like every 5 minutes. That can be slavery with good marketing. Real freedom is being able to direct your attention even when something easier is calling you. Real freedom is being able to keep a decision when your impulse wants to leave. Real freedom is saying, this matters more, even when it does not feel as stimulating. That kind of freedom is less attractive, less glamorous, but far more powerful. Because whoever cannot control attention cannot control the day. And whoever cannot control the day eventually discovers they cannot control the direction of life. Not completely, of course. Nobody controls everything. But there is a massive difference between living by reaction and living by choice. Most people do not decide their day. They react through it. They react to messages. They react to emails. They react to small urgencies. They react to tiredness. They react to boredom. They react to notifications. They react to fear. And at the end of the day, they say, I was busy. But being busy is not the same as moving forward. There are full days that build nothing. There are crowded schedules that hide avoidance. There is a kind of tiredness that does not come from deep work. It comes from being fragmented all day. That tiredness is different. Deep work can tire you, but it leaves useful weight. Fragmented distraction tires you and leaves emptiness. It does not exhaust you through intensity. It exhausts you through scattering. It is like trying to fill a container with a crack in it. You pour energy. You pour intention. You pour hours. But something is leaking all the time. And then you wonder why you are not progressing. Sometimes the answer is not lack of time. It is lack of connected time. You have 10 minutes here, 15 there, 20 lost, 5 minutes of guilt, 30 of distraction, 40 of tiredness. The material exists, but it never joins. And what never joins does not build. It is like having bricks scattered across an entire city. Technically, you have material. But you do not have a house. To build, you need to gather. Gather attention, gather energy, gather intention, gather time. Even if the block is small, it needs to be whole. That is why one of the first goals should not be do more. It should be do more in one piece. One complete thing, one complete block, one complete conversation, one complete rest, one complete task, even if it is small. Complete. Because incompletion also tires you. Too many open loops become mental noise. Too many unfinished things begin to buzz inside you. And when the mind has too much buzzing, it looks for distraction so it does not have to hear it. So distraction does not only create disorder, it also covers it. That is why closing small things can be powerful. Finish a pending task. Remove what no longer matters. Decide what has been floating. Prepare tomorrow's first action. Close real and mental tabs. Clarity reduces avoidance. It does not eliminate it, but it reduces it. Because many times, you do not escape because the task is impossible. You escape because it is blurry. You do not know where to begin. You do not know what counts as progress. You do not know what the next move is. And when something is blurry, the mind searches for relief. So here's a simple rule. When something overwhelms you, make it smaller, not later. Do not send it to tomorrow. Do not turn it into an eternal plan. Do not open another video to feel ready. Make it smaller. 5 minutes, 1 page, 1 paragraph, 1 call, 1 decision, 1 ugly first version, something. The mind fears a small concrete action much less than a large vague threat. And once you enter, you can often continue. Not always, but often. The strongest resistance is usually at the door, not on the path. Your mind exaggerates the cost of beginning. It tells you it will be terrible. It tells you that you do not have energy. It tells you that you need more time. It tells you that you need inspiration. It tells you that the conditions are not right. But after 5 minutes many times, you discover that it was not impossible. Not because it became easy, but because you stopped fighting the beginning. You were inside, and being inside changes the relationship. This applies to writing, studying, training, planning, cleaning, creating. Any meaningful task that your mind has turned into a mountain. Do not negotiate with the mountain. Take 1 step, a real step, not symbolic, not mental, not imaginary, real, because action removes fog. A task you think about for weeks grows inside your head. A task you touch for 20 minutes comes down into the real world. And in the real world, you can correct, you can divide, you can ask, you can practice, you can move. But you cannot move on top of a fantasy you never touched. Distraction loves abstraction. As long as you do not begin, everything feels bigger, harder, more confusing, and that confusion justifies more escape. But when you begin, even badly, the task stops being a monster. It becomes material, and material can be worked. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Many people are not afraid of effort. They are afraid of the mirror, because focus is a mirror. When you focus, there is less noise to hide inside. The task is in front of you. Your level is in front of you. Your real progress is in front of you. Your lack of practice is in front of you. Your excuses are in front of you, and that is not always pleasant. It is one thing to say, I want to change my life. It is another thing to sit for 40 minutes in front of the task that proves whether that is true. It is one thing to say, I want to learn. It is another thing to face the awkwardness of being a beginner. It is one thing to say, I want to build something. It is another thing to survive weeks where nobody claps, nobody understands, and there are still no results. Distraction protects you from that early humiliation. It allows you to keep feeling like a person with potential without putting that potential on trial. And that is a subtle trap. Being in love with your potential, not your execution, your potential. You like imagining who you could become. You like thinking there is something powerful inside you. You like believing that one day, when you have time, when you feel ready, when things align, you will do something important. And maybe that is true. Maybe there is potential. But potential can become a shelter. Because as long as something remains potential, it cannot fail. As long as you do not truly try, you can still imagine that you were capable. As long as you do not expose it, it stays intact. As long as you do not work it, it stays beautiful in your mind. But potential that never becomes execution eventually decays, first into frustration, then into excuses, then into cynicism, then into resentment toward people who did something with less talent, less intelligence, or less perfect conditions. At that point, distraction is no longer just a bad habit. It becomes a way to protect the fantasy of who you might have been. That is why some people prefer being distracted to being committed. Commitment forces measurement. It forces you to compare intention with behavior. It forces you to see whether you are actually willing to pay the price. And not everyone wants that answer. Some answers about yourself hurt, but they also free you. Because once you accept that many distractions are avoidance, you gain power. Not perfect power. Real power. The power to notice the exact moment where you usually leave. That moment is small, but it is sacred. Discomfort appears. The impulse appears. The exit appears. And for once, you do not obey immediately. You do not need to become a hero. You do not need to promise 3 hours. You only need to stay. A little. Breathe. Look at the task. Name the impulse. Say internally, this is an exit, and return. That act looks tiny, but it breaks the pattern. And a life can change that way. Not always through dramatic revolutions. Sometimes a life changes when a person stops obeying the first impulse. Once then again, until they discover something they had forgotten. They can direct themselves. They can stay. They can survive the first minutes of resistance. They do not need to feel motivated to begin. They do not need the task to feel easy to do it. Discipline stops feeling like a prison. It starts feeling like recovery. You recover 10 minutes, then 20, then 1 hour, then a morning, then a week where your life is no longer completely kidnapped by impulses. No, it does not become easy overnight. It does not become romantic. It does not become a movie. But it becomes possible. And repeated possibility becomes identity. Because identity is not built only by thinking differently. Identity needs evidence. It is not enough to say, I am disciplined. Keep a small promise. It is not enough to say, I want to focus. Protect 20 minutes and do not sell them. It is not enough to say, I want to build something. Give it a living part of your day, not only the tired leftovers of the night. Identity needs proof. And proof is created through concrete action. Small, yes, but real. That is why the first goal should not be never get distracted. That goal is absurd, humanly impossible, and it prepares you to hate yourself after the first failure. The first goal should be more serious. Stop lying to yourself when you are escaping. Because when you stop lying, the pattern loses elegance. You can no longer say so easily, I am just resting. You have to admit, I am avoiding. You can no longer say so easily, I do not have time. You have to admit, I had some, but I gave it away. You can no longer say so easily, tomorrow will be different. You have to admit, tomorrow will be the same if I do not change one piece of the system. And yes, that hurts, but it also organizes you. Truth, when you do not use it to destroy yourself, can become structure. You do not need to hate yourself. You need to observe yourself. Where does my attention break? At what hour? With what emotion? With what excuse? During what kind of task? After what thought? Because distraction is rarely completely random. It has patterns. Some people get distracted when they begin something difficult. Some get distracted when they are close to finishing. Some get distracted when they do not know the next step. Some get distracted when they fear judgment. Some get distracted when they are tired, but do not want to admit they need sleep. Some get distracted when they are alone. Some get distracted when they have to choose between two paths. Every person has a favorite escape door, and until you know yours, you will keep thinking your only problem is lack of discipline. But when you detect the pattern, you can intervene earlier. Not after losing 2 hours. Before, when the signal first appears, when you feel that little restlessness in the body. When your mind says, just check this. When you suddenly want to organize something that does not matter. When you look for an easier task so you can feel productive. There, exactly there. That is the training ground. Not when you have already fallen. Not when the whole afternoon is gone. Before, at the edge of the impulse, because impulse lives on speed. The faster you obey, the stronger it becomes. The more space you create between desire and action, the more you return to yourself. That space is small, but that is where practical freedom lives. I see the impulse. I name it. I do not obey it yet. I return to what matters. That is all. And it is a lot, because most people do not live. They react. They react fast enough to avoid feeling responsible. The time got away from me. My phone won. I got distracted, as if a force outside them took full control. And yes, persuasive design exists. Yes, the stimulation is strong. Yes, not everything depends on one isolated individual decision. But be careful with using that as complete absolution. Because if you always say, it beat me, you train a defeated identity. And a defeated identity gives up before trying. A mature position is in the middle. I recognize that the environment is competing for my attention. And precisely because of that, I cannot live without defense. Not because I am superior. Because I am vulnerable. And because I am vulnerable, I design. That sentence matters. Because I am vulnerable, I design. I do not leave the phone beside me and then brag about strength. I do not open social media before work and then demand depth. I do not fill my day with stimulation and then wonder why I have no clarity. I do not set traps for myself and then blame myself for falling. E-design. That is applied humility. It means accepting that your tired self needs help. It means accepting that your attention should not depend on constant heroism. It means accepting that decisions made in advance can protect the weaker version of you. Because all of us have a weaker version, an impulsive version, a version that negotiates, a version that wants the easy thing, a version that postpones, a version that looks for exits. Maturity is not having no such version. Maturity is not giving that version all the keys. That is why systems matter. A rule before sleep, a rule after waking, a clean workspace, a short list, a protected block, a time for messages, a pause before reacting, a boundary for entertainment. Not to militarize life, but to stop life from leaking through tiny holes. Because that is how it happens. Life does not disappear all at once. It leaks. Through micro-decisions, through easy access, through invisible permissions, through boundaries never set, through just today repeated for years. And just as it leaked in fragments, it can be recovered in fragments. One block, one morning, one decision, one kept promise, one distraction less. One faster return, one better evening. It looks small, but repeated small things stop being small. Life respects accumulation, for better and for worse. Accumulate avoidance, and you get dispersion. Accumulate focus, and you get direction. Accumulate broken promises, and you get internal distrust. Accumulate kept promises, even small ones, and you get self-respect. There is no mystery. There is accumulation, and maybe that is the most sober part of this. You do not need a perfect version of yourself. You need to stop voting every day for the version you say you do not want to be. Every action is a vote, not final, not eternal, but a vote. Checking the phone at the first discomfort is a vote. Returning to the task is a vote. Sleeping late for cheap stimulation is a vote. Closing the day on time is a vote. Promising and abandoning is a vote. Keeping one small promise is a vote. Consuming to avoid feeling is a vote. Sitting for 5 minutes with something difficult is a vote. And with enough votes, an identity appears. Not the one you declared, the one you practiced. So, if you want to know who you are becoming, do not look only at your intentions. Look at your repetitions. Your intentions may be beautiful. Your repetitions are honest. And that should not humiliate you. It should locate you. Because if your repetitions do not match your vision, that is where the work is. Not in saying, I am a failure. Not in dramatizing. Not in quitting. In adjusting the next vote. The next vote is always near. That is the good news. You may have lost the morning, but there is still the next hour. You may have lost a week, but there is still the next block. You may have failed many times, but there is still the next decision. Life does not return everything you have lost. But it does give you places where you can stop losing more. And that is enough to begin, not to fix everything. To begin. One of the biggest traps of distraction is that when you have already lost time, it convinces you to lose more. It says, you already ruined the day. You already started badly. There is no point now. Better tomorrow. And better tomorrow sounds hopeful. But many times, it is just permission to keep escaping today. Tomorrow can be useful. But tomorrow can also become an emotional trash can where you throw everything you do not want to face now. Tomorrow I train. Tomorrow I study. Tomorrow I start. Tomorrow I decide. Tomorrow I change. And yes, tomorrow comes. But it comes with the same mind, the same environment, the same easy exits, the same habit of negotiation. So tomorrow does not feel like a new beginning. It feels like repetition with another date. That is why, if you truly want to change, you need to distrust your own tomorrows a little. Not hate them, just understand that tomorrow will not do the work you keep avoiding today. Tomorrow becomes different only if today changes one piece of the system. One piece, not your entire life. One piece, close one app, move the phone away, open the document. Write 5 lines. Prepare the clothes for training. Choose tomorrow's first task before sleeping. It does not look like much, but it breaks the spell. The spell of believing that thinking about change is the same as changing. It is not. Thinking about change can be the beginning, but it can also become mental entertainment. A movie inside your head where you see yourself disciplined, focused, strong, and free. And because that movie feels good, you can spend years watching it instead of living it. That is one of the saddest places a person can stay. not in the complete absence of dreams, but in dreams used as anesthesia, imagining what you will do so you do not feel what you are not doing. And we do not need to be cruel about this. Everyone has done it. Everyone has used a fantasy to breathe for a moment. Everyone has said one day to avoid the pressure of today. The problem is not having done it. The problem is building an entire identity there. Because when the imagined future replaces the executed present, life becomes a debt to yourself. And internal debts charge interest. They charge interest in anxiety, in irritability, in comparison, in low self-respect, in needing more distraction, in that bitter feeling of getting older without becoming the person you said you would become. That is strong, but many people feel it. They may not say it, but they feel it. And that is why they search for noise, because noise helps them avoid a question. When did I start moving away from myself? Not from others, from myself. From the version of me I respect, from the version of me I promised to protect, from the version of me that said I would not let the years pass like this. That is why protecting your attention is not just productivity. It is the repair of self-respect. It is teaching yourself again that when you say this matters, your behavior can follow. Not perfectly, not always with energy, not always with desire, but with enough seriousness to not sell your future for a tiny reward. Here is another distinction. You do not have to hate pleasure. You do not have to live rigidly. You do not have to remove entertainment from your life. A life without pleasure becomes dry. A life without leisure loses humanity. The problem is not enjoyment. The problem is when small pleasure rules major decisions. The problem is when rest stops restoring you and starts controlling you. The problem is when you no longer choose entertainment, but entertainment chooses you. There is a difference between watching something because you want to watch it and watching something because you could not stand staying with yourself. There is a difference between a conscious pause and an automatic fall. The first one returns you. The second one steals you. And to distinguish them, you need honesty. After a pause, ask, do I feel clearer or more scattered? Did I choose this, or did I fall into it? Did this restore my energy, or did it only numb my guilt? Can I return to what matters, or is it harder now? Real rest helps you return. Avoidance pushes you farther away. And if after resting you need another distraction so you do not feel bad, maybe you did not rest. Maybe you numbed yourself. That precision matters. Because when everything is called tiredness, you never know when you need sleep and when you need courage. When everything is called stress, you never know when you need a pause and when you need order. When everything is called distraction, you never know when you are bored and when you are avoiding a decision. Naming the problem correctly is the beginning of the exit, and often the correct name is not lack of time. It is lack of protected attention, lack of emotional direction, lack of tolerance for the first discomfort, lack of respect for private promises, lack of a system that does not depend on inspiration. Because inspiration is unstable. It comes, it goes, it returns, it disappears. You cannot build a serious life depending on emotional weather. You need structure that works on normal days, especially on normal days, because life is made of normal days, not perfect days. Not cinematic days, not days where everything aligns. Most of your results are built on days where you do not feel inspired, but you are not destroyed either. Average days, gray days, quiet days. Days where you could do something or escape, and nobody would notice the difference. That is where a lot is won or lost. So the question is not, what do I do when I am motivated? That is easy. The question is, what protects me when I am in my average version? When I am a little tired, when the task feels heavy, when my mind begins to negotiate, that is where you need simple rules. Before consuming, create something. Before checking messages, close one task. Before opening social media, complete one block. Before starting the day, choose the task you cannot abandon. Before sleeping, do not turn the last hour into a storm of stimulation. Not because these rules are magic, because they teach your mind an order. First direction. Then stimulation, first commitment, then pleasure, first what builds, then what entertains. That order changes self-esteem, because you begin to see yourself as someone who does not sell himself so cheaply, someone who can wait, someone who can stay, someone who can choose. And that feeling is worth more than any trick. Because when you recover respect for your own word, discipline stops feeling like an external fight. It becomes coherence, not always comfortable, but coherent. And coherence gives a kind of peace that distraction can never give. Distraction calms you for minutes. Coherence calms you from within. Distraction entertains you. Coherence organizes you. Distraction helps you forget. Coherence lets you look at yourself with less internal debt. Maybe that is what many people are really looking for. Not to become productivity machines. Not to squeeze every second. Not to become obsessive. Just to stop feeling in debt to themselves. To stop feeling that every day they promise and every day they fail. To stop living with the sentence, I know I could do more, but something always beats me. The phone, the tiredness, the anxiety, the laziness, the fear, the disorder, tomorrow. But at some point, a mature person has to stop speaking as if everything that happens to them is an external force. Not to blame themselves for everything, but to recover agency. Because as long as everything beats you, you do not exist as a force. And you do exist. Maybe weak at first, maybe inconsistent, maybe with a history of falling. But you exist. And you can strengthen that part, not with speeches, with repetition, with design, with truth, with boundaries, with small blocks of focus where you prove that you are not owned by every impulse that appears. That is the heart of change, not being perfect, not removing every distraction, not living like a monk, but no longer being owned by your impulses. Because an impulse is not an order. It is a proposal. Your mind proposes. Your body proposes. The environment proposes. The screen proposes. Emotion proposes. But proposing is not commanding. And every time you remember that, you recover a piece of internal government. I want to check my phone. That is a proposal. I want to leave this task. That is a proposal. I want to open something else. That is a proposal. I want to escape because this feels uncomfortable. That is also a proposal. But not every proposal deserves obedience. That sentence matters. Not every proposal deserves obedience. If you remember it at the right moment, it can save you from many small falls. Because you do not need to fight every impulse like a mortal enemy. Sometimes you only need to see it for what it is. A wave, an invitation, a discomfort looking for an exit. And if you do not answer immediately, many times it lowers. It does not disappear forever, but it lowers. And when it lowers, your ability to choose returns. That is where real discipline begins, not in crushing emotions, not in denying desire, not in pretending nothing attracts you, but in being able to feel attraction without obeying it automatically. That is practical maturity. And it is rare, because we live in an age that confuses desire with instruction. If I want it, I do it. If I feel like it, I follow it. If it bores me, I leave. If it makes me uncomfortable, I escape. But a life built that way becomes fragile. Because everything important will bore you at some point. Everything important will make you uncomfortable at some point. Everything important will ask from you when you do not feel like giving. So if your rule is to obey every internal state, you will never sustain anything deep. Your emotion of the moment cannot be the absolute boss of your life. It should be information, not dictatorship. Listen to it, understand it, respect it, but do not hand it all the keys. Because some emotions protect, and some emotions sabotage. Some tiredness asks for rest. Some tiredness asks for escape. Some fear warns you. Some fear shrinks you. Some desires enrich you. Some desires empty you. Maturity is learning the difference. And that difference does not appear while you are numbed by constant stimulation. It appears when you create space, silence, pause, depth, attention. That is why protecting attention is not only about producing more. It is about thinking better, feeling better, choosing better, living with less internal noise. A scattered person does not only work worse, they understand themselves worse because they never stay long enough with an emotion to know what it means. They never stay long enough with an idea to develop it. They never stay long enough with a decision to mature it. Everything moves fast. Everything gets replaced. Everything gets covered. And when everything is covered, nothing is resolved. Some people do not need more advice. They need to stop covering themselves. They need to sit with a difficult question without escaping after 3 minutes. They need to write what is happening inside. They need to walk once without noise. They need to work without 10 open tabs. They need to be a little bored without running towards stimulation. Because boredom is not always the enemy. Sometimes boredom is the doorway to clarity. But if you kill every second of boredom with content, you never cross that doorway. You stay at the entrance, always stimulated, never deep. Here is one of the great paradoxes. People say they want clarity, but they avoid the conditions where clarity appears. They want ideas, but they cannot tolerate silence. They want direction, but they cannot tolerate pause. They want focus, but they cannot tolerate initial boredom. They want results, but they cannot tolerate repetition. They want confidence, but they cannot tolerate keeping small promises without applause. So maybe life is not failing to respond. Maybe the conditions are inverted. You want fruits of depth with habits of surface, and that cannot hold. Not because you are incapable, because you are planting in soil that you never let stay still long enough for roots to grow. Think of a seed. If every time it begins to open, you pull it out of the soil to check whether it has grown, you kill it. Not with bad intention, with impatience. Your projects are like that. Your mind is like that. Your character is like that. Some things need to remain buried for a while, working silently, without applause, without novelty, without quick reward. But a distracted mind wants immediate signs. It wants fast proof, fast motivation, fast visible progress. And if it does not feel that, it looks for something else. Another idea, another video, another plan, another emotion, another beginning. Because beginning feels good. Finishing requires character. So be honest. What are you feeding? Fire or root? Fire impresses. Root sustains. Distraction is fire. Fast. Bright. Hot. Deep attention is root. Slow. Hidden. Quiet. But one day, when the wind comes, what has roots remains, and what only had fire is already gone. You do not have to answer with words. Your day already answers. Your first hour answers. Your way of working answers. Your way of resting answers. Your reaction to boredom answers. Your ability to return answers. And if you do not like the answer, do not destroy yourself. Change it in the next repetition, because that is where you have power. Not in rewriting the whole past, not in controlling the whole future. In the next repetition. The next time your hand reaches for the phone. The next time your mind says, later. The next time a task feels uncomfortable. The next time you want to open another tab. The next time an emotion wants to drag you. There, in that small scene, you can do something different. And maybe nobody will see it. But you will. And that matters. Because there is a kind of quiet pride that does not need an audience. The pride of returning. The pride of keeping a small promise. The pride of choosing what matters while the easy thing was available. The pride of resting without disappearing. The pride of being loyal to a private promise. That pride is not vanity. It is self-respect recovering. And when self-respect begins to recover, life changes texture. Not everything gets fixed. Problems do not disappear. Goals do not become easy. But you begin to feel less divided inside. Less war between what you say and what you do. Less debt to yourself. More alignment. And alignment matters deeply. Because an aligned person spends less energy fighting themselves. They have more energy to build, to think, to decide, to rest, to look at life without so much escape. Distraction, when it dominates, splits you. One part wants to move forward, another wants to escape. One part promises, another negotiates. One part dreams, another postpones. One part demands, another numbs. And living split is exhausting. More exhausting than it looks. That is why focus is not only productivity. It is integration. It is gathering pieces of yourself around something that matters, even if only for 20 minutes. During those 20 minutes, you are not 1,000 fragments. You are one person doing one thing. That heals something. It sounds simple, but it heals, because in a world that fragments you, doing one thing with presence is almost like coming home. Back to yourself. Back to your body. Back to your intention. Back to reality. And maybe that is why it is hard. Because coming home also means seeing the mess you left. But seeing the mess is the beginning of ordering it. You cannot order a house you refuse to look at. You cannot order a life you keep covering with noise. You cannot order a mind you never let breathe. So maybe today you do not need another stimulus. Maybe you need one moment of honest attention. Look at your day and ask, where am I giving away life? Not time, life, because time sounds abstract. Life sounds more honest. Every hour is life. Every block is life. Every morning is life. Every night is life. Every piece of attention is a piece of your existence placed somewhere. So the question changes. It is not only, where am I wasting time? It is, what am I giving pieces of my life to without truly choosing it? That question should feel heavy. It needs to feel heavy, because some things only change when they recover weight. Distraction makes serious things feel light. It tells you nothing matters that much. There is always tomorrow. 5 minutes do not matter. 1 hour does not count. One more night changes nothing. But a life is made exactly from what seemed not to count. Minutes, hours, nights, mornings, small choices, returns or escapes. There is no separate life outside your small days. Your life is your small days. And if your small days are dominated by dispersion, your larger life will take that shape. But if you begin to change your small days, your larger life begins to change shape, without drama, without exaggerated promises, through accumulation. This matters especially if you feel that you have projects, ambition, or the desire to build something of your own. Because a person with ambition and no focus suffers twice. They suffer because they see possibilities, but do not materialize them. They suffer because they imagine a lot, but execute little. They suffer because they feel potential, but accumulate evidence of abandonment. They suffer because they know they could be further, and they also know they have given away too many hours. That combination can become poisonous if it is not corrected, because ambition without execution becomes frustration. Frustration becomes cynicism. Cynicism becomes defense, and one day the person begins to mock what they once wanted. Not because they stopped wanting it, but because it hurts to know they did not try seriously. Be careful with that. Be careful with turning unexecuted dreams into sarcasm. Be careful with despising what actually reminds you of your debt. Be careful with criticizing people who try only because their attempt exposes you. Be careful with saying, that does not work, when maybe what happened is that you could not stand sustaining it. Not always, of course. Some paths should be abandoned. Some goals change. Some ideas are not worth it. But make sure you are not calling avoidance maturity. Make sure you are not calling wounded frustration realism. Make sure you are not saying, I do not care anymore, about something you abandoned when it became difficult. Honesty matters again. Does it truly no longer matter? Or does it matter so much that you preferred not to look at it? That question can hurt, but it can also rescue a part of you. Because maybe not everything you abandoned is dead. Maybe some things are only buried under noise, guilt, and postponement. You do not need to return to everything, but it is worth knowing what is still alive. What project? What desire? What skill? What change? What conversation? What version of you? Maybe something is still calling you. Not with explosive excitement, with persistent discomfort. With the feeling that if you never do it, something inside you will keep asking. Listen to that. Not to overpromise, to give it a real block of attention. Because what is still alive needs oxygen, and attention is oxygen. Without attention, even true desires weaken. Not because they were false, because you left them without nourishment. Some goals do not die because they are impossible. They die from starvation. They never received hours. They never received structure. They never received presence. They only received occasional fantasy. And fantasy does not nourish enough. It entertains, but it does not nourish. Attention nourishes. Action nourishes. Repetition nourishes. If something matters to you, feed it for real. Not with speeches. Not with promises. Not with identity decoration. Real nourishment. Time. Energy. Protection. Return. And if you cannot give it much, give it little. But give it something honest. Because repeated honest little is worth more than a giant promise that never arrives. Now, one final point needs to be clear. Recovering your attention does not mean becoming rigid. It means becoming more of an owner. Not owner in the sense of controlling everything. Owner in the sense of consciously participating in your own life. Being able to say, I chose this. I allowed this. I will change this. This does not enter right now. This matters. This can wait. This was escape. This was rest. I am returning to this. I am closing this. That ability to name and direct gives you presence back. And presence is the ground of everything. Without presence, there is no deep learning. Without presence, there is no real work. Without presence, there is no true rest. Without presence, there is no mature decision. Without presence, there is only reaction. And a life of reaction can look busy. It can even look normal. But in the end, it leaves a bitter question. When did I stop choosing? Do not wait until that question arrives too late. Ask it earlier. Ask it today. Not to scare yourself, to locate yourself. Am I choosing or am I reacting? Am I resting or am I escaping? Am I building or am I stimulating myself? Am I moving forward or am I protecting the fantasy that one day I will move forward? Am I using my attention as a tool or am I leaving it as loot for anything that wants it? Because in the end, your attention always builds something. Always. If it does not build your project, it builds someone else's project. If it does not build your judgment, it feeds someone else's noise. If it does not build your life, it increases the time you spend watching other people's lives. If it does not build your future, it builds the business of those who learned how to keep you watching. That is not a conspiracy. It is basic reality. Attention produces value. The question is for whom? For what? And at what cost? Every time you give your attention, something gets stronger. Your distraction can get stronger. Your anxiety can get stronger. Your comparison can get stronger. Your impulse can get stronger. Or your ability can get stronger. Your clarity, your project, your character, your peace, your future. You cannot strengthen everything at the same time. You have to choose. And if you do not choose, the environment chooses for you. That is the central message. If you do not choose, the environment chooses for you. Not because the environment hates you, but because it is full of competing forces. What has no defense gets taken. What has no boundary gets invaded. What has no priority gets postponed. What has no structure gets diluted. Your attention needs defense, not paranoia. Defense, your future needs a calendar. Not fantasy, a calendar. Your rest needs boundaries, not guilt. Boundaries. Your ambition needs hours, not only desire. Hours. Your identity needs proof, not phrases. Proof. And all of this begins with something small. The next time the impulse appears, there. Not in some ideal future version of yourself. Not when you buy another tool. Not when everything is calm. Not when distractions disappear. The next time. When your mind says, just check. When your body wants to escape discomfort. When the task feels heavy, when the day already feels lost, when guilt wants to push you into more avoidance, when boredom promises that something more interesting is outside. In that moment, pause, not a huge pause, an honest pause. Ask yourself, what am I about to avoid? Not what am I about to do. You already know that. Avoid. What am I about to avoid? Maybe a task, maybe a decision. Maybe an emotion, maybe a doubt, maybe the possibility of failing, maybe silence, maybe effort, maybe a version of you that no longer accepts so many excuses. And when you see it, do not insult yourself. Do not dramatize. Do not promise to change your whole life. Just return. Return to the page. Return to the call. Return to the study. Return to the training. Return to the document. Return to real rest. Return to the pending conversation. Return to the decision. Return to yourself. Because that is the real movement. Returning to yourself. Distraction pulls you out. Focus brings you back. And maybe that is the simplest way to say it. You are not only fighting to produce more. You are fighting not to live outside yourself. Not to spend years reacting to stimuli you did not choose. Not to turn your best hours into fuel for things you will not even remember. Not to look back and discover that your important life was always waiting after just 5 minutes. Because those 5 minutes, repeated, can become years. But one return, repeated, can also become destiny. That is the good news. The same force of repetition that buried you can rebuild you. You are not an eternal prisoner of the pattern. But you do need to stop feeding it as if it does not matter. It matters. Every time matters. Not dramatically, cumulatively. And the cumulative governs life more than the spectacular. So when this ends, do not look for a huge emotion. Look for one small action. Just one. Something you can do today to prove that you understood. Not tomorrow. Today, one door to close, one task to return to, one note to write, one block to protect, one distraction to move away, one small promise to keep, something. Because if this only inspires you, it can evaporate. But if it moves you into action, it has already started becoming life. And if this kind of reflection speaks to you directly, if it makes you uncomfortable without destroying you, if it forces you to look at what noise usually covers, then maybe this mental space is for you. Not because it gives easy answers, but because it refuses to pretend that deep things are built with comfortable excuses. There are more layers, more patterns, more truths that hurt a little but organize you. For now, keep one. Your attention is not a detail. It is the place where your future begins or disappears. And the next time a distraction appears in front of you, do not ask only whether it is fun, fast, deserved, or normal. Ask something more serious. Does this return me to the life I want to build, or does it help me keep escaping from it? Because that answer, repeated enough times, does not only define your productivity, it defines who you are becoming. And if you can still ask that question honestly, you are not lost. You only need to return. Once, then again, until returning stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like self-respect,